in Amud HaTfilah, by Samach Aleph. This is from the Ben Paris Yosef, which is another sefer of the Tovas Yankov Yosef. It says, Torah Zov Nasalochem Nikudas HaKesef. This is the pasuk in Shir Shir. So we're going to make for you lines of gold with dots of silver. This is Torah Zov. Gold always means the chilu, the appropriate fear, the appropriate awe is called gold because it's on the left side. And on the right side is kesef. Kesef is milashon kisufin. When I'm drawn towards something, that's called kesef. So kesef is on the right side and gold's on the left. Why is gold more expensive than silver? Because the appropriate behavior to the left is much harder to come by than the appropriate behavior to the right. Many people will want to love. Many people will want to be close to everyone and have access to everything and to just remove all the boundaries. But not many people will have the courage. Not many people will know when to step up, when to push back. That is much more difficult to find. And so that indicates the gold. The gold is more precious than the silver. The silver is expensive, but you'll find it here and there. The gold is something that indicates a very rare personality, someone who has realized something about life that most haven't realized. And so Torah Zov will do the lines of gold, which is from the left side, and the dots are going to be from silver, which is from the right side. So he says, Shelo yidaber haTorah v'hatfilah b'pniyah chitzonis. When a person does anything he does, anything he says, there's something that's motivating, there's something that's driving. That something is a spiritual force. And the spiritual force has a root of where it's coming from and how it was dressed up. And so when we're doing the action is a body. Within the action is hiding an intention. The intention is the soul. What's the soul of this body? That's going to designate the character, the holiness. And then everything that comes from that, meaning the action itself and all the ramifications, all the consequences from that action, everything is going to be based on the soul. The soul was the intention of the original doing. When we do something, even if most of our motivation is pure, but we have also a side motivation. We have an alternative motive of why we're doing it. The alternative motive is contaminating the soul. The action is now mostly because of something, but also a little bit something else. That alternative motive is going to be the Yetzer Hara of that action. What does the Yetzer Hara in that action do? It means that now within the consequences, there's going to be some parts that are not perfect, because that's what was invited by the intention of the one that was doing. So it says when we do in the divine realms, when we're doing in order to gain wisdom, when we're doing learning, when we're developing our spiritual side, or when we're doing prayer, when we're turning towards the spiritual side in a request. So we have to be careful. What soul are we putting into that divine creation? When we're interacting with the world, okay. But when we're interacting with the divine, what are we creating? What's the soul? of our speech, of what we're trying to accomplish. Because based on that soul, something is going to manifest. We want our prayers to be received. If our prayer is received, it means that now this soul is going to be in charge of the world a little bit more. And so if that soul has alternative motives, how is that going to affect the results of the prayer? The same thing with the wisdom. In the wisdom, we're turning towards the spiritual in order to develop. Something within reality is going to develop. What are we going to develop? That very much depends on our intention. If I'm going to learn, I might be going to learn the exact same sefer every day. But every day I'll see different things in that sefer because in that day I had different experiences. My intent is different. The place from where I'm looking is different. So I'm seeing different. So what am I going to see? It depends what I'm looking for. If a part of me is looking for the wrong thing, that's exactly what I'm going to find. And that's now going to get involved in my wisdom. My wisdom is going to be contaminated with that wrong thing that I was looking for. And so it's like creating an evil inclination within our learning, an evil inclination within the davening. It says should be careful, shouldn't. Why? From these wrong intents get created the peels, the external layers of the action. The bitter parts. And those bitter parts, mislavish barasham linkum amen. At the end, it's going to come out in a person that's going to cause this. The one who's praying, the one who's learning, is going to end up suffering because this intent that was impure is going to dress up in someone else and come to bother him somehow. Because the result of the action is going to be based on the intent. The result of the wisdom is going to be based on the intent. The result of the prayer is going to be based on the intent. And so if the soul is partially not properly directed, then the results are going to be partially not properly directed. That's going to come out, and somehow in the world of thought, he's going to have some portions that are not on his side. That's going to come out also from other people. כמו ששמעתי, כאין זה ממורי, I heard from the Baal Shem Tov, וזה שאמרו שלא יהרגו ראשון שבדור. In every generation there are the souls that their main purpose here is to keep the holy souls in check. If the holy soul makes a mistake, then these souls are going to come and bother him. That's their purpose. That's why they were created. This is going to keep the holy soul in line. That's what the holy soul would want. And so if the holy soul does his actions, his manifestations with the wrong intentions, then those souls who have already been designated to bother them will somehow appear and bother them. So in the ancient world, bothering them meant going to the extreme, trying to kill them. That's what bothering looked like early on. And this is why we see in every generation where there was a big man that was protecting us and helping us, there was also a big enemy that was trying to hurt us, that was trying to defeat us. Like, for example, when Moshe Rabbeinu comes, there's a Paro in the picture. He has to measure up to Paro. When David HaMelech comes, he has to measure up with Goliath. When Mordechai Tzaddik comes, he has to measure up with Haman. And this is the nature of how the soul world creates, because in the beginning, there's unity, which means there's no extremes, there's no going in any directions. And then to the extent that we go in one direction, we go also in the other direction. This is what it means, zeh l'uma zeh. Because Baruch Hu created for every level, there's an opposite. Because this is how creation happens. Creation happens by taking one and spreading it into its opposites. And so the more extreme I'm going to go in one direction, I have to go to the same degree in the other direction in order to keep creation balanced. Otherwise, it will fall apart and then it comes back into the unity. So to create this balance, we have the extremes. And these extremes are also represented by the stars that surround us, where the zodiac is set up. Archan Kamin Milchama, says the Sefer Yetzirah. He arranged them like in a war, meaning they're battling against each other by balancing the extremes. So if winter is going to hold the extreme temperature on the lower side, summer is going to hold the extreme temperature on the higher side. And that's what's going to balance the scale. And like that, all the different opposites. Because in the essence, there's no opposites. Opposites is what appeared to be true because of creation, but in essence, opposites are not true. For example, we think of opposites like light and darkness, but darkness doesn't exist. Darkness is an absence of something. We think of life and death, but death doesn't exist. Life is when we are aware of existence, and that simply means we no longer know what happened to that being, because their shell is falling apart in front of our eyes. We don't know where that life is. But either there is life or there isn't life. Death is not a place to be. Good and evil. There's no evil. There's good, and then there's deranged good. Deranged good doesn't feel good. There's good that hasn't come out properly. There is good that's incomplete. Good that's still evolving. There's many forms of good. There's no evil. Pain and pleasure. Existence is a form of pleasure. When that pleasure doesn't work out, we call that pain. But pain is a lack of pleasure. Naturally, we need pleasure, we need joy in order to be here. If we don't enjoy being in our body, then there's pain, there's a lack of life, there's a lack of aliveness. But everything really in the unity is the only way that it exists. The opposite is not real. The opposite is what seems to be because of creation, because of how our mind is processing the process of creation. But it doesn't have any basis in reality. It's a lack of something. Every opposite is a lack of something. It's not in and of itself anything. And the same goes for these neshamas. The neshama that's right is the real being. The neshama that's wrong is the opposite. It's not a real thing. There's no one there. There's no one home. At the end, we're going to realize that it was never. Haman was never. He was just a response to there having to be a Mordechai, so there was a Haman. But there wasn't really a Haman. Haman appears to be. Pari appears to be. He isn't really. Because in order to be, it means that he's recognized what his existence means. That's being. And when you recognize what your existence means, you're no longer in conflict with it. To be in conflict with it means that you're not really. You only appear to be. But you're in conflict with your own existence, then you're not. These people were in conflict with their own existence. They might have thought that they're in love with their own existence, but they were in love with the idea of their existence. They didn't really need existence. Existence sounded like a great idea, but it didn't happen to them. They were worshiping the idea. They were doing everything to keep the idea going. But it wasn't really existence because it wasn't the nature of what is. It wasn't open to really being what it is. It wasn't ready for that. And so by the good getting confused with the intentions of the bad, they feed the bad. And they feed the bad to be bad to them. Because whoever feeds the bad gets the bad. Whoever gives force to the bad, he's the one that gets punished by that same bad. That's justice. If he didn't feed the bad would have less power. Whoever gives the bad power gets the bad. And the good can give power because the good has more access to the spiritual realms. So he's praying. His prayer is going to go in maybe. The bad is going to pray, doesn't matter. The good is going to pray, matters, but wrong intention. And now something is being fed that shouldn't have been fed. There needs to be more to the left than to the right. There needs to be more awe than love in order to get it right. Why? Because it says, Shenikra nekudas hakesef, he said, Toire zov naselach, lines of gold, im nekudas hakesef, with a little bit love. Mainly gold, with a little silver. And that's because we have to direct ourselves accurately. The nature would be if we direct ourselves as we know, as we are used to thinking, towards the one who makes it all, there will be just fear, no love. If we were to accurately direct ourselves the way that we are, it means that we have expectations about life, about the world, about what should be. He's not fulfilling our expectations. And yet there's nothing we could do to force him. He's in charge. He's doing it as he knows. If we disagree, our ideas are going to fall away. And so if we turn towards the Creator accurately, we would feel fear. He has all the power. What do we have? The righteous already knew him enough that they started falling in love with him. This requires a lot of work. This requires breaking through the ice, breaking through a lot of disappointments, a lot of ideas of what should be, a lot of what we think it would be better. And to realize that he knows better, that he has the best plan. He has the only plan. If we got to drive the bus, if we got to decide where things will go, it would be a disaster. If he would listen to everything that we propose, the world would be much worse off. He knows when to listen and how to listen. And so if we're directing ourselves accurately, there needs to be toiras of lines of realization. Im nekudas hakesef. Suddenly, when we see what we're interacting with, the fact that he cares about us, the fact that he designed us to be in the privileged position that we are, this starts building a real relationship. But if we don't have awe, we haven't realized what we're interacting with, then it's not him. If we come in with a lot of love and very little fear, that Torah, that prayer is probably filled with alternative motives. To find the real thing, to find the real love, to find something that's loving him and not an alternative motive, not any type of trying to convince him to like us. Not any kind of trying to fulfill, well, I assume I should be loving him, or it's a mitzvah, or otherwise where do I turn? So yes, I love him. But to him, the way that he knows us, to develop a love like that he should say, like he says by Avram, Zera Avram Havi, Avram my lover. That type of love. And the world in Avram's time didn't look that wonderful. Avram had to hide his wife in a box. But he loved the Creator. He saw something in him. He saw, hey, this Creator, he has potential. I'm going to bet on him. So he calls him my lover. V'hemen b'Shem v'yachshavei l'tzedakah. He believed in him. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked at it as if, wow, look at this man. He's giving away from what he has to support me. Even though the Creator can do whatever he wishes. But what does he wish? He wishes that we should be in charge. Can we give him that? Well, he already took it for himself. He just put us in charge. But he wishes that it should work out well. Can we give him that? That's his wish with creation, is that it should work out well. He wants us to be in charge. Can't argue with that. He already established that. But he wants it to work out well. That hasn't been established. That's left for us to do. Hashemayim Shemaim L'Shem, he made the order. V'oretz nasan livnei Adam. We have to work it out. That's what he wants from us. I'm the big king up there, you're the little king down here. Can you handle being the little king? And so to develop a love for him is to really develop a relationship. It's for this to become real. It's to live it. It's to know it with every fiber of our being. And then it becomes real. When it becomes real, the awe is automatic. Because we're always interacting with the great unknown. We're always interacting with a power that's just the powers that it created are awesome. Just the littlest of its creations are awesome. But we're interacting with the thing itself, not with any of the creations, with the thing itself. That's the big surprise that awaits us as soon as we leave the body, is that we've been interacting with the thing itself, with the one that's in charge of all of it. It's not like in a business where there's lower level managers and lower level managers and lower level managers. Here, there's nothing besides him. He dresses up as all the managers. Wherever you see a manager, it's also him. Wherever you see an employee, it's also him. Whenever you see a robot, it's also him. It's all him. And so when we leave the body, we see that we've been interacting with him, the big one, the biggest one. Nothing in between. There's no one in between. This is why we're not allowed to have any intermediaries. We're not allowed to bow to any intermediaries. We're not allowed to bow to anything that's not him. We report to him. When this becomes clear, then the love starts to grow. That's an authentic love. That's a love of something that's beyond comprehension. Not something that we've gotten accustomed to, something that, an idea. We're not falling in love with an idea. We're falling in love with something that encompasses everything that exists. It's a force that's ever present, that makes everything be. And in order to find that love, we have to see through the mask. We can't fool ourselves. If we see the world, we see the suffering, we see the difficulties, and we don't have an answer, then we cannot love. It's against our nature. We have to be able to explain to our soul what is going on before we can start feeling love. We have to have some type of access to reality in order to be able to love reality. Samach Beis from the Tzafnas Paneach, which is also the Toldus. Shemati Memori, ki al yidei pniach chitzonis shikoim shleima mizeh nivre odom hamitzaroi. Same idea again. That with the wrong intentions, creating the wrong spirits, those spirits incarnate within those who are anyway there to hurt others, and then the one who gave power gets hurt. And so this is the same idea. And this doesn't just happen on the individual level. This is even much easier to trace when we look at the greater scale. Meaning that if Klal Yisrael is going to have the wrong beliefs, and therefore their worship is going to be tilted towards motives that are not aligned with the truth, this will create enemies for Klal Yisrael as nations. Nations that will come and hurt us in a very terrible way because of the type of spiritual worship that we are doing. This happens every single generation. B'chol dor v'dor omdim eleinu l'chaleseinu. Why? Because our beliefs are still not aligned with the truth. And so our worship, our prayer, is going up into the heavens, and the parts of it that are not accurate are creating our own enemies. This includes everything. From the Chorban Habayis, Nebuchadnezzar, all the way through all the Goliaths, all the way even through the Holocaust. All of that we created with our worship. It's because the God that we are calling is actually answering. That's the scary part. And we don't understand how much we have dressed up that God, how much we've made him seem cruel to our own soul, and so when we call the cruel God comes. And that spirit gets dressed up in whoever is available for mischief, whoever is available to cause pain. This is why it says, Kol hametzel Yisrael na'aseh rosh. Whoever hurts Klal Yisrael becomes a very important figure. He becomes a leader. Why does he become a leader? Because now all the wrong worship within Klal Yisrael is going to give him power. And there's plenty of wrong worship in Klal Yisrael. As long as there's Golas, the definition of Golas means wrong worship. If it was right worship, it would invite the right God, and then we would be saved. And so in every generation, we're inviting. Based on how we're inviting, that's what appears. The power is in our hands. The power is in our minds, in our hearts. This is the way he designed. This is what he wanted. He wanted and he shall have. He wanted us to be in charge of reality here. And so everything was designed to perfection so that now we are really in charge. This is not a test. We've been in charge for thousands of years. Everything that happened is on us. Our wisdom has saved us from suffering, and our foolishness has caused us suffering. Our ignorance has made life worse and worse, even while the external conditions kept on getting better and better. Life became worse. The experience became worse because of our ignorance, because we haven't worshipped wisdom. We've worshipped brute force. The leaders were chosen based on force, based on a sword. Who can fight better? He's going to lead. Not a good idea. Terrible idea. So terrible, millions of people died because of it. But even the ones who lived didn't live. Because who decided what does it mean to live? The one who knows how to kill best. He was in charge of what it means to live. He was going to define it. All our cultures are coming from there. The one who knew how to kill the most, he was going to tell us what it means to live. And whoever disagreed, well, guess what would happen? This is how we have the cultures of today. The Greek cultures, the Roman cultures. This is specifically what the entire culture was designed to do. To create killers. The root of this is in our worship. What we worship is the spirit that's going to come within humanity and is going to do what we asked it to do, even though we have no idea what buttons we're pushing. We're pushing buttons. We're always pushing buttons. We're always asking for God to appear in some form. And He will appear. He won't be late 1 second. People want to be practical with life. So they think, okay, let's grab life where we can measure it. But that's not being practical with life. That's killing the soul. That's not practical at all. It's more practical to not have any money and live on the street than to grab life simply by the actions and say, now I get it, I'm in charge. That's to lose the soul of the thing itself. That's to lose the connection of what's taking place. The practical side of life is the worship. The practical side of life is the intention. What do you think is happening here? That's the practical side of life. If that's off, it doesn't matter what you're holding on to. It will all crumble. It has no basis in reality. It might seem, it might appear, in our world, in our culture, where whoever grabs more has more, it might seem a very successful strategy, but it's not life. It's not related to the Creator and His will. It has nothing to do with the real intention of why we're here. If anything, it defeats the purpose. It ruins it. The practical side of life is the soul. Are you getting along with the soul? All of our sages who were very practical, they weren't practical with their income. They didn't figure out their income, most of them. They had a lot of trouble with their income. But they figured out something else. And that was more important to them. It wasn't only more important to them, it was the only thing that was important. Nothing else showed up as important. They would do what they can. But that wasn't where they were focused. That wasn't what life was about. That wasn't how you measure success or failure. There was something real that they were after. And that related to the soul. If they had the soul, then they had life. Then everything was already going to work itself out, either in this body or after it, or when we come back into it, at some point. But if we've lost the soul, how is it ever going to work out? It might work out very well, but how is it going to work out for us if we've lost access to the soul? That's the practical side of life. Nothing in the culture can make things practical. The culture is not practical. The culture is how we survive while people who don't really care, who don't really know, who haven't really bothered to understand what our species is about, are in charge. And we have to listen to them. There's no choice. This is the best humanity can come up with right now. Okay, we'll deal with that. But that's certainly not where life is. That's not where purpose can be found. That's not where meaning is going to be found. The most practical relationship with it is to survive it. But don't invest your soul in there. They're going to take your soul. They're not going to give you anything in return. People are busy for their entire productive life. They're giving their soul. They're putting everything into it so that eventually they can retire. When they retire, there's nothing left. When they retire, they're not going to suddenly discover reality and understand it better. When they retire, they're going to be tired. It's going to be time to rest, to let things play out, and to leave. When is life going to happen? When is what justifies the process? When is that going to happen? Where's that part? When was it? While he was working, or when he was sleeping, or when he was in his lunch break? When did it happen? When was the main part that all the other parts are working for? Skip that part. No soul. The soul got invested into the system. The system doesn't pay for soul. It will pay for your time. It will pay for your body. It will pay if you get hurt. It doesn't pay for soul. Even if it were to pay everything that it has to offer, it wouldn't pay for soul. Soul is something else. Soul is from a different place. A whole different dimension. Can't give it away for anything that the culture has to offer. Culture is not rich enough to buy soul. And so our worship, this is what decides what culture is going to come against us. When we're going to learn how to worship, they're going to worship us. Those enemies, those who came for us and wanted to kill us, they're going to come and bow and ask to be taught the truth. When we're going to know how to worship, everybody will want to know how to worship. Because they're going to see the benefits of worshiping properly. They're going to see what it means. Right now, they don't see the power of our worship. It seems like we're worshiping and then we're getting hurt. We're worshiping and then we're getting hurt. Oh, worshiping doesn't work. No, worshiping works. That's why we're getting hurt. We have to learn how to do it right. So that's the principle that he's teaching us. סמך גימל, ליאמר אדם בשבס אספלה בכוונה ולא בחול, שלא יהיה כעבודם המשמשים מסמלך, כשהמלך עומד לפניהם הם מזדבקים בעבודה, כשאין המלך לפניהם הם מזדרזים בעבודה. ואין זה עבד נאמן. So it says, Shabbos, or a time when things are the way that one likes to feel, so then I'll approach the king. But in the Yemei Sachoil, when it's hard, when there's different processes going on, I'll stay away. So he says, this is like a servant who, when the king is standing there, he's very active and he's loyal and he's showing the king how good he works, and he likes the king, he's doing it for real. But as soon as the king leaves, he drops his duties. And so that shows that he's not really loyal. He doesn't really realize who he's working for. He doesn't really understand the relationship of what he's doing to who he's doing it for. Because when the one is not standing there, it's not the same performance. And so that's not someone who cares about the interests of the king. That's someone who cares about his own interests. He cares about his own interests, and he knows it's within his interest that the king should like him. It's within his interest that the king should think of him as a good servant. And so he's doing it for himself. One who cares about the interests of the king, he cares about the outcome. He cares about the results. It's not about whether the king is looking or the king is not looking. It's how can we make sure that what the king wants happens. And so that's his main focus. Therefore, whether he is in front of the king, he's not in front of the king, whether it's Shabbos or it's a weekday, whether it's Moichen de Katnus or Moichen de Gadlus, he is on it. He remembers who he's working for. אבל יבוד אלוהי באמונה שרע לו בלא המלך ויתחיל כל המשמרת עד שיובא לפני המלך אף על פי שאין יוכל לדבר לפונו ואין יראה לו ולפונו ואף על פי כן יעשה למלך רצונו כי רחמונס גודלו לבד מאוד. It says that the servant, of course he wants to be in front of the king. Of course we all want to be in that place where we feel connected and we feel things are flowing. And so when he's away, he shouldn't say, oh, now the king is not here, I'm resting. No, you do, you work, you become. You channel all your energies the best way you know how. Because then the king will see that. This awakens the king's compassion. If the person is just relieved that he doesn't have to do, because right now is not the time where the king is around, so then he will just stay in his condition. But if he will constantly search because he knows that he can't handle his life without access to the king, he can't handle existence without access to the truth, so then this will drive him and this will make the truth find him. And so at all times we're meant to be approaching the king. We need something. We need something more desperately now than all the generations before us. Every generation is in bigger need. Like the prophet says about the days before Mashiach, Hina Yomim Boim, Yom Hashem Elokim, Vishlachti Rav Baretz, I'm going to send starvation. But it's not going to be a starvation for physical things. It's going to be a starvation for spiritual things. It's going to be a starvation for truth. People are going to be desperate for some truth. And in those times, each person, according to his avodah, is going to impress the king. The king sees how we're interacting with the situations, all the situations. And accordingly, we evolve. According to how loyal we are to what we know, we can know more and we can handle more. According to how aligned we are with our own truth, the more our body can carry situations, information, knowledge, that previously our body wouldn't be able to carry. This is something that's physical, just like everything that happens to the soul while it's in the body. These are physical developments, these are physical changes. Even what we're doing right now, when we're speaking, we're making physical changes. We're connecting neurons, we're disconnecting neurons. Waves, changes of chemicals, the blood is changing. This is all happening in real time. This is how the system works. This is why we can understand. Understanding means that the organs have received the change. They've received the shift in their condition. That's why there's an understanding. Knowledge is when the information has spread through the brain. And so that's already a physical change. But understanding is when now the knowledge within the brain has made changes within the blood and within the nerves, and now the organs are reacting to those changes. Now there's understanding. Now it registered. Oh, that's what you mean. Ah, I feel it. That shift is a physical shift. Everything in the soul is physical while she's dressed up in the physical. And so according to what we're doing while we're in the physical, we're impressing the king. We're impressing the creator. We're impressing the one who designed the system. Says, oh, this one is mastering my system. He's proud of the ones who master his system. He's frustrated with the ones who are clumsy with his system. He likes it. He thinks it's well done. He likes it so much, he actually went ahead with the plans. He went all in. But now, when he's all in, he has to remember the settings that he set up for himself, so he doesn't get into conflict with them. These are the two sides of the keruvim. The creative power that set it up the way that it's set up, and the part of him that's receiving that setup. That's the female. The one who made it, who gave it to us, and the one inside of us that's receiving it, that's Knesset Yisrael, that's the female. And so the keruvim are together means the design that was created was received appropriately by the one who's interacting with it. Keruvim turning apart means the one who created the design is arguing with the one who's living in it. And so then the Dmus Adam, the Tzelem Elohim, is not aligned, it's not expressed. It requires both sides. It requires a unity in order for us to have a manifestation of the Tzelem Elohim. If the parts are in conflict, there's no unity, then there's no Tzelem Elohim. And so that force that designed, when does it come into the design? When the one who is receiving the design is united with it. And so as long as we're not united with it, we're a servant. Who are we serving? We're serving the future being that is going to be united. Whenever we're not united, we're a servant. Can't be the king. The king is united. Who am I worshiping when I'm a servant? I'm worshiping the king. Who's the king? The king is the united one that I'm going to be when I learn how to unite. And so if I worship him appropriately, even while I'm in exile, even while I'm separated, then he sees that, he recognizes. And that's what helps me get out. That's what helps me unite. Is that now the king wants to get closer to me because I've shown interest in him. The type of interest that he needs us here. He needs us here because he already decided that we're going to run the place, and therefore, if we're all against him, he can't explain himself. And that's what's been happening. To various degrees, depending on which person, which community, which religion. But it certainly happened. That's what it means that there's no prophecy. It means humanity is turned against him and he can no longer tell us his message. And so he needs us. He needs access to his world. He decided we're going to run it, and we decided we're not listening to him. There's a real problem going on. So we need to turn towards him. This is why all the mitzvahs are l'shem yichid kitchabrich yishchintai. It's to unite the two kruvim. All the learning is, if it's for this intention, this neshama will create the God that we're all looking for. This worship is going to call the unity. That's the one we've really been inviting. That's the one we've been trying to invite the entire time. Oy Samach Daled. Kol Yemei Ani Roim Al Pi Ma She'amar Rabbeinu Zal Ein Ani Ele Min Adas. So the real one who is poor, we said, the part of life that is the culture cannot be the real side of life. The real side of life is the spiritual side of life, is the internal side of life, is the relationship to the soul. And so if we say someone is poor, what do we mean by that? It has to mean he is poor in his relationship to his soul. How does one become poor in his relationship to his soul? If he doesn't know his soul, then he's poor. We are all very poor. People used to be much richer with their relationship to their soul. And so, Ein Ani Ele Min Adas, that's what Chazal teach us. Someone is poor, it means that he lacks das. He lacks awareness. He lacks consciousness. Therefore, he's not in contact with the soul. He's poor spiritually. So it says, Kol Yemei Oni she'oni b'das roim, all his days are bad. Rotze loimer she'ein tfilose v'lemida nechsheves klal lefonav yizborach. Shmoi. Ki bevadei beloy dechilo rechimu. If someone is poor, even the good things that he's doing are not really good. Because if he's poor in his das, if he doesn't have a proper relationship with his soul, what kind of an intention can he come up with that's actually going to be anywhere accurate, that's going to build anything good in this world? If someone doesn't have access to their soul, their intention cannot even be appropriate. They don't understand what we're trying to accomplish. And so Kol Yemei Ani Roim, everything that all their days are bad because they don't have das. They don't know how to create. It's like if an animal does an action, so then the intention of the animal obviously is never going to go beyond the animal's intelligence. And so therefore it's always going to be the act of an animal. It can never be more clever than that. And so the same goes for the das. We can never do a deeper intention, a more accurate intention. We can never do a spiritual deed that's bigger than our das. Our das is our awareness of what it is we're doing. And that's the extent of the neshama that we can create for our action, that we can create for our speech. That's how far, that's the highest shelf we can reach in order to take from there. So it says, for sure there's not the proper awe, there's not the proper love. V'leparchas laila, it cannot go above. Then the Gemara asks, why do you say that his days are always bad? So on the pshat level, why do you say that his days are always bad? Meaning because he's poor, he never has a good meal, he never sleeps good. There's Shabbos and Yom Tovim, where everybody invests even beyond their means, and then probably even the poor guy is eating well. So why are we saying all his days are bad? Some days there's a party and it's good. So he says, now he's going to explain it spiritually. What does it mean? That even a poor person, that doesn't have das, occasionally something wakes up in him that says, hey, look, I'm in a body, I'm on a planet I don't recognize, I don't really know what's happening. Something in him wakes up to look for something more meaningful. Something in him is trying to yearn. He's going to go look for, if he knows how to read, he's going to try to read something. He's going to try to find something. He's going to try to ask. He's going to go to a rabbi, go to a priest. Something in him wakes up at some point to say, what's really going on? What's really the story? In those moments, he is praying with the right intention because he wants something different. He realizes that he is distant from the truth. The teretz in the Gemara is Shini Veses Tchilas Chol Imayim, that even if the poor guy on Shabbos and Yom Tov eats well, because his body is not used to eating well, as soon as he eats well, he has a stomachache, and then he suffers. And so when someone is not used to living well, even if sometimes they live well, they can't enjoy it. Their body is not ready for it. The body needs training. The body is always recreating again and again the same patterns. And so if suddenly we change the pattern on the body, it takes time for the body to adjust. Now he's going to say the spiritual explanation. Now he had an awakening. Now he's looking for truth. Now something is properly aligned. He sees himself, he says, look at me now. Now I'm even looking for the truth. Until now I was already a big man. But now I'm a big man looking for the truth. Now there's no one else as big as I am. So it says someone who doesn't have das, even when he ends up doing something good, he's already going to find a way to trip over it, and it's also going to become a problem. He thinks that that's it. Now he's better than everyone else. Now it's just smooth cruising. So it's like the one that, because he doesn't have food every day, so when he eats good food, it makes him sick. So a man that doesn't have a good connection to his soul every day, when he has a good connection to his soul for a moment, that makes him sick. He doesn't know how to handle that. He doesn't understand it. So when someone has constant access to their soul, so they have access to their soul, they understand this is what life is meant to be. Someone doesn't, and for one moment he does, he thinks, whoa, look at me. Look what happened here. And he goes out of balance. So even now, it's not really doing the proper effect. So that the Yetzirah doesn't come only through proper food and drink. And what that means spiritually is that the desire for someone to feel like they're above everybody else will come through the good deeds that they do. The little bit that they have is going to try to convince them that they're already the best. And that's because the Yetzirah is trying to use your energy against you. So the good deeds, they give you energy. It's real. You're more, you're better. But instead of understanding that this is what we were designed for, not only this, but so much better we were designed for. It's early to take credit. Instead, the ego wants to use all the juice that has been generated, and then the soul is again left with nothing. The ego is already pumping itself up. Look at me. Look at what I got. I even have access to soul. And so then the soul loses out again. And so therefore, access to proper prayer, access to proper learning is through das. And what is das? Essentially, how do we test das to know if someone has das? Das is to be mafchen ben tov l'ra. Since the Eitz das, our das has been contaminated. Our das has in it good and evil. Okay. To the extent that we know how to distinguish between good and evil, to that extent we have das. So here, yeah, the thing over here again, this is from Tzavos Rivash, is it's very short on the positive side, and it's very long on the negative about this guy who doesn't have das. But really, today, we know the situation. And people don't have das. This is how it is. We don't have the proper... One of the simonim of das is that we have the proper emotional response to information. Because the das is like the place where the mind meets the body. It's the screen that we're constantly seeing. That's the das. And when the das is healthy, all the emotions get activated in the right time according to the information that's being received. But when a person has chalishus hadas, or chaz v'sholem tiruf hadas, where his das is segregated, different pieces, his das is multitasking to the extent that there's no clear thought that's in charge of the das. So then we might tell him the information, that this information will change his life for sure. And if his das was healthy, he would know it. He would dance. And here he won't even be able to hear it. Like it happened by Klal Yisrael. It says, "V'leisham el Moshe mikotzer ruach ma'avodah kosher." The kotzer ruach means that they have shortness of breath, shortness of spirit, a short attention span. And because of a short attention span, they cannot feel the das. They cannot emotionally respond appropriately to a situation. And so when we lack das, we might hear information that's really helpful to us and we won't know it. We won't realize how important it is for us because we're not getting the emotional response. The body is not confirming. This is what we spoke about earlier when we said that understanding is the response of the body to the information. The information is called chachma. Understanding is called bina. Chachma and bina are a father and a mother to the das. The das is the son. So the das gets born through the chachma, the information, and the bina, the bodily response to that information. And through that are born the emotions. The das, who is the son, he includes in him 6 dimensions. Or rather 3 dimensions, which is 6 directions. And so within the das, we have chesed to the right, gevira to the left, teferes in the front, and netzach and hoid and yesod. And between all the 6, we have all the 6 directions. These are the directions within the das. These are the dimensions of the das. And so for us, that we're coming from a place that has no das, when we try to direct ourselves, when we try to create intention, it's so much more important that we should remove all our assumptions about reality and about what we think it is. Whatever it is we think it is will for sure not help us in order to direct our intention appropriately, because we know that we're coming without das. We know that we're coming from a place with no das. And if we start taking life more seriously, our das will grow. One of the main reasons that we don't have das, that we're so distant from our das, is because we've invested our emotions. We gave away our das to things that lack importance, to things that lack depth. And by doing that, we've made our emotional responses disorganized. They no longer understand what's important and what's not important. For example, if we're getting most of our emotional stimulation from fiction, so then our emotions can no longer tell what's real and what's not real. They can no longer know how to get excited from something that's real and important, because they're comparing it to the fiction. The fiction seemed a lot more extreme. And so fiction can desensitize us to what's actually taking place. Or even what seems to be within reality. It doesn't have to be fiction, but a strong emotional response to things that relate to money. A weak emotional response to things that relate to belief. A weak emotional response to things that relate to emotions themselves. All this is messing with the das. This is causing tiruf hadas. Because it's telling our das a story that's not true. It's emphasizing areas through strong emotion that are not important, and it's de-emphasizing areas through weak emotion that are extremely important. They're the vital functions of the soul. And so if we go through these types of manipulations, the das loses its balance. The das can no longer tell what's really important and what's not really important. And so then we stand facing the Creator, and we don't have the appropriate emotional response. If we don't have the appropriate emotional response, it means we didn't properly understand. The mother of the emotions didn't wake up. That's why the children, the emotions, didn't come up. There's no mother. There's a father, there's information, but there's no mother, there's no understanding. The heart didn't respond to this information. And so there's no emotion, there's no child. And so part of rebuilding our das is to start realizing where we emphasize, where is our emotion, where is our excitement, what excites us. And it could be simple things, but it needs to be aligned with something bigger. We can get excited from anything, but what does it mean to us? We can get excited about food. Every person that's excited about food has a different intention of why he's excited about the food. Is it the taste? Is it the energy? Is it the demonstration that the Creator cares and He made it nice? It looks nice, it tastes nice. Is it what we're going to do with that energy? Is it an opportunity to sit next to other people, or to chat, or to read, or to whatever? Is it because that's when the lunch break happens and we don't have to work? Many people could look forward to the food, and everybody has a different intention of what does it mean to him. The intention That's what counts. That's what's driving. And then that's what's going to create the emotional response. That's what's going to create the das. So I get excited about food. Okay, how do I link that to the greater good? Then it's fine. Then the excitement is good. Then the das can be built by this excitement. If it's something related to the bigger purpose of why I was born in the first place, if it's something related to the bigger purpose of why do humans eat in the first place, or why are there humans in the first place, all these things are good reasons to get excited. All these things will emphasize to the soul real importance, that it should keep important. And then the food will nourish that intent. The food will be a healthy body to a soul that's full of light. And then we heal our das. That's the main purpose of the Golus, is to heal our das. What went into Golus all the way by the Eitz HaDas was the das. And within that das, we've been pushing buttons, we've been causing things that we don't particularly enjoy. And through healing that das, we're going to be able to return to a place that we very much enjoy. May it happen soon.